She arrived at the academy in a gray uniform, worn shoes, and offered to replace the principal ballerina. The dancers mocked her, but when they saw her execute the first movement, they could barely believe what they were seeing. It was a cold January morning when Helena Santos, 38, entered the sacred territory where elite ballerinas trained to conquer the world's most important stages. Her dark hair pulled back in a simple bun hid strands that had once been styled by professional hairstylists before performances in packed theaters. She limped slightly, a painful reminder of a night that destroyed everything, as she pushed her cart through the marble corridors. Helena had worked as a janitor for 10 years, invisible to the ballerinas in their expensive leotards, transparent to the choreographers who created works of art, non-existent to the teachers who molded future stars. She cleaned the same studios where dozens of ballerinas rehearsed, her hands touching the same bars she once commanded with unmatched technical perfection. The academy was particularly tense that morning. In 2 weeks, the International Ballet Festival would take place, and the company needed a revolutionary choreography that captured not just technique, but pure emotion. The problem was that all the rehearsals seemed technically perfect, but empty of soul. The judges didn't just want to see steps executed with precision. They wanted to feel something. In the main studio, Madame Elise Beaumont, the 55-year-old French director, watched yet another failed rehearsal with an expression of growing despair. "Stop! Stop!" shouted Madame Beaumont, banging her cane on the floor. "You dance like robots. Where is the passion? Where is the soul?" Victoria Ashford, the current 28-year-old principal dancer, stopped in the middle of a grand jeté. "Madam, we're following James's choreography exactly. Every movement is technically perfect." "Technique without emotion is like a body without a heart." Madame Beaumont shot back. "The judges will destroy us. Svetlana Petrov will be among them, and she doesn't accept mediocrity." James Richardson, the 42-year-old head choreographer, crossed his arms defensively. "Perhaps the problem isn't my choreography, but the dancer's execution." Victoria glared at him. "Excuse me, are you suggesting that I, principal dancer of this company, can't convey emotion?" "I'm suggesting that perhaps you're all too worried about appearance and too little about feeling," James replied. Helena was cleaning the mirrors at the back of the studio, trying to be invisible as always. But hearing the discussion, she couldn't help a small sigh. She immediately recognized the problem. The choreography was technically correct, but didn't tell a story. It had no soul. "You!" Madame Beaumont's voice cut through the air like a whip. "Janitor, are you sighing? Do you have something to say about our choreography?" Helena froze, her face turning red. "No, madam. Sorry. I was just cleaning." "She's probably sighing because she's never seen real dance before," said Victoria, laughing cruelly. To her, this must seem like magic. Some ballerinas laughed along. Helena lowered her head, continuing to clean. "You think this is funny?" said a hoarse voice from the door. It was Professor Dmitry Volkov, 72, former Bolshoi dancer and now Academy consultant. He walked slowly into the studio, his eyes fixed on Helena. "You laugh at the janitor as if she couldn't understand art." "Professor Volkov," said Madame Beaumont, "we didn't mean to offend, but we're in crisis. The festival is in 2 weeks, and we don't have a choreography that works." Dmitry looked at Helena for a long moment, and she could swear she saw recognition in his eyes. But he said nothing. "Not yet. Continue rehearsing," he said finally, "and perhaps look around. Sometimes inspiration comes from unexpected places." Helena left the studio quickly, her heart pounding. She knew Dmitry. He had been her mentor at the Bolshoi years ago. Had he recognized her? And if so, why hadn't he said anything? In the corridor, she leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. Memories came back like a flood: the Bolshoi stage, the deafening applause, the feeling of flying during a perfect grand jeté. And then the fall, the searing pain in her knee, the whispers of sabotage, the false drug accusations, everything crumbling within weeks. "Hey, are you okay?" A young voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Sophie Chun, a 19-year-old ballerina, one of the few who treated Helena with basic kindness. "I'm fine, thank you." said Helena, quickly wiping away a tear that had escaped. Sophie hesitated. I saw how Victoria talked to you. She's like that with everyone who isn't important in her view. Sorry. You don't need to apologize for her, said Helena gently. But thank you for the kindness. It's rare around here. You like ballet? Sophie asked suddenly. I noticed you always clean slowly when there are rehearsals. Like you're watching. Helena smiled sadly. I used to. A long time ago. Did you dance? A little. When I was young. The lie hurt, but was necessary. Helena couldn't reveal who she was. Not yet. Maybe never. Sophie smiled. You should have continued. It's never too late to go back to what you love. If only it were that simple, Helena thought. But her knee would never be the same. And even if it were, the ballet world had banished her. There was no going back. That night, Helena stayed late cleaning. She always volunteered for the night shift. Fewer people, less humiliation, and most importantly, access to the empty stage. When the last instructor left, locking the door at 11 p.m., Helena waited another hour. Then she took her service keys and went to the academy's main theater. The stage was empty, lit only by the ghost light, that single lamp that never goes out in theaters. Helena stopped in the wings, her heart racing. It had been 12 years since she'd set foot on a real stage. She took off her work shoes and, barefoot, walked to the center of the stage. The wooden floor was cold under her feet. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Her mind went back to that night at the Bolshoi. Not the night of the disaster, but an earlier night. A performance of Swan Lake, where everything had been perfect. Where she had felt she was flying, not dancing. Helena began to move. First slowly, testing her knee. A simple ply. Then a tendu. The movements returned like muscle memory, buried but not dead. Her body remembered even when her mind tried to forget. She began to improvise, combining classic Russian technique with movements she learned growing up in Brazil. A fouette followed by an adapted capoeira movement. A grand jeté that ended in a samba turn. It was unconventional, it was strange, but it was honest. It was soul. The music was only in her head, but her body followed perfectly. She danced the story of someone who fell, who was broken, but who still had fire inside. Each movement told pain, loss, but also resilient hope. Her knee protested in some movements, but she compensated, finding new ways to express what she needed to express. It wasn't technically perfect, but it was alive in a way that no perfect choreography could be. Helena danced for 20 minutes, sweat pouring, tears falling, but smiling. For the first time in 12 years, she was truly dancing. Not for applause, not for judges, but for herself. To remember who she was. When she finished, she fell on the stage floor, breathing heavily, crying and laughing at the same time. She didn't know the security camera had captured everything. And she didn't know that the security system, which should be private, had a flaw. Night guards frequently shared interesting videos among themselves. The next morning, Helena arrived for her shift expecting another day of invisibility. But something was different. Ballerinas whispered in groups, looking at their phones. "Did you see?" said one. "It's impossible," said another. "Who is she?" Helena continued pushing her cart, assuming they were talking about some celebrity or common viral video. But then Sophie ran to her, eyes wide. Helena, you need to see this." "See what?" Sophie showed her phone. It was grainy security camera footage of the stage. From last night. Helena's heart stopped. "Someone hacked the security cameras and leaked this," said Sophie, excited. "It's everywhere. Every dancer in the city has seen it. Helena, who is this woman? She's incredible." Helena couldn't speak. She watched the video. Her own form dancing on the empty stage. Movements that merged techniques she had spent years mastering. "I don't know," she lied weakly. But then Victoria appeared, her face a mask of fury. "This is an outrage. Someone broke into our academy and used our stage. Madame Beaumont is furious." James was beside her, but his expression was different. There was admiration and something more. Whoever she is, she's extraordinary. This fusion of classical and contemporary, of Russian technique and Brazilian movement, it's exactly what we need for the festival. You can't be serious, said Victoria. This is vandalism. Trespassing. It's art. James shot back. And be honest, Victoria. This anonymous woman in a security video has more emotion in 30 seconds than you've had in 3 weeks of rehearsal. Victoria turned livid. How dare you? Silence. Madame Beaumont's voice echoed through the corridor. She stood in her office doorway, tablet in hands, having obviously watched the video. All of you in my office. Now. Helena tried to hide, but Sophie grabbed her arm. Come. This is important. Everyone who works here is being called. In Madame Beaumont's room, all the ballerinas, instructors, choreographers, and even staff like Helena were packed in. Someone broke into our academy last night. Madame Beaumont began, her voice controlled but tense. Used our stage without permission. Normally, this would be reason to call the police. She paused, looking at each face. But the video is extraordinary. Whoever this ballerina is, she created in 20 minutes what we couldn't create in 3 weeks. She understood what the judges want, true emotion. Victoria was about to explode, but Madame Beaumont raised her hand. So I'm making an appeal. If the ballerina in the video is in this room, come forward. There will be no punishment. On the contrary, I'd like to discuss the possibility of you choreographing our presentation for the festival. Total silence. Helena felt all eyes scanning the room, searching for someone who looked like the figure in the grainy video. Her heart was beating so loud, she was certain everyone could hear it. This was her chance. She could step forward, reveal herself, return to the world she loved. But then she thought of her daughter, Isabella. How the girl hated her, believing the lies. How her ex-husband would use this against her. The janitor who pretends to be a ballerina. How the ballet world had destroyed her once and could do it again. No one, said Madame Beaumont, disappointment clear in her voice. Very well. Then we'll find her another way. It was when Professor Dmitri spoke, his voice calm but firm. Madame Beaumont, may I suggest something? The video shows very specific Russian technique. Technique that could only be learned in places like the Bolshoi. Helena felt his eyes on her, but he didn't look directly. Not yet. Continue, said Madame Beaumont. I suggest we hold an open class, said Dmitri, for any woman who works in this building. Ballerinas, instructors, staff, everyone. We'll see who has the physical capacity and technique we saw in the video. Victoria let out a cruel laugh. Professor, with all respect, are you suggesting we test janitors and secretaries? This is ridiculous. Why? Dmitri finally looked at her. Are you afraid a janitor might dance better than you? The silence that followed was tense. Victoria was red with anger, but had no answer. I think it's an excellent idea, said James, smiling. After all, clearly our conventional approach isn't working. Why not try something different? Madame Beaumont considered. Very well. Tomorrow, 6 a.m., open class. All women who work in this building are invited. We'll see who has hidden talent. As everyone left, Sophie approached Helena. Are you going to participate? Me? No, I just clean. But you said you danced when you were young, Sophie insisted. Come on, it'll be fun. And even if you're not the woman in the video, it could be a cool experience. Helena wanted to refuse, but something in Sophie, that genuine hope, that kindness, made her hesitate. I'll think about it. That night, Helena was in her small apartment, looking at an old photo. It was her, Isabella at 4 years old, and her ex-husband Richard in happier times. Before the sabotage, before the accusations, before everything fell apart. Her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her respond. Hello. Helena Mikhailovna Sokolova. The voice was Dmitri's, using her Russian stage name from the Bolshoi. Or do you prefer Helena Santos now? Immediate tears began to fall. Professor Dmitri, I saw you on the first day you started working there, he said gently. I thought my eyes were betraying me. The best ballerina I ever trained, scrubbing floors. But I waited. I waited to see if you were ready to come back. I can't, Helena whispered. My knee. Your knee danced last night. Dmitri interrupted. I saw the video. Yes, you compensate. Yes, some movements are modified. But Helena, you're still extraordinary. And more importantly, you finally have soul in your dance. Something that was missing when you were young and perfect. They destroyed me once, Professor. Svetlana spread those lies about drugs. No one believed me. I lost everything. Svetlana will be a judge at the festival, said Dmitri calmly. I know. And that's exactly why you need to dance. Not for revenge, but to show that lies don't kill truth. They only delay it. Helena sobbed. My daughter hates me. She believes I'm an addict, that I destroyed our family. Richard made sure of that. Then show her who you really are, said Dmitri. Not with words. She won't believe words, but with dance. With truth so clear that even Richard can't deny it. What if I fail? What if my knee can't handle it? Then you fail, said Dmitri simply. But at least you tried. Helena, I'm 72 years old. I know something about regret, and I can tell you, you'll regret the dances you didn't dance more than the falls you took. The next morning, at 5:45 a.m., Helena was at the door of the main studio. She wore old leggings and a t-shirt. She hadn't had proper dance clothes in years. Her heart was beating irregularly. Sophie arrived, already in full leotard. Helena, you came. I'm so happy. Other ballerinas began to arrive, along with 2 curious secretaries and an administrative manager. Victoria entered like a queen, her designer leotard impeccable. Well, well, said Victoria, looking around with disdain. What an interesting group. The janitor is here. That's adorable. I hope you don't dirty the floor you just cleaned. Some ballerinas laughed. Helena kept her eyes down. Madame Beaumont entered with Professor Dmitri. Ladies, thank you for coming. We'll start with basic bar exercises. Dmitri will lead. Dmitri positioned himself at the front. We'll begin with plies. First position. Helena stayed in the back, hoping to be forgotten. But Dmitri had other plans. You in the back. He pointed directly at her. Come to the front. I want to see everyone clearly. Victoria whispered loud enough for Helena to hear. This is going to be embarrassing. Helena moved hesitantly to the front. When Dmitri began playing classical music and calling out movements, her body responded automatically. Plie, tendu, degage, rond de jam. Movements she had done thousands of times. Her body remembered each one. Madame Beaumont watched intently. She could see the perfect posture, the complete hip rotation, the foot extension that took years to develop. This wasn't a person who danced a little when young. This was a trained professional. Center, Dmitri announced. Adagio. I'll demonstrate a combination. He showed a complex sequence, arabesque pench, promenade, develop a la seconde, and a challenging equilibre. The ballerinas executed it, some struggling with the equilibre. Victoria did it perfectly, of course, finishing with a smug smile. Janitor, said Victoria. Your turn, if you can. Helena took a deep breath. Her knee was already protesting from the bar exercises, but she had come this far. She executed. The arabesque was high, but not as high as it used to be. The promenade was solid. The develop was beautiful. And the equilibre, she held it for 10 seconds, perfectly still. An equilibre that many professional ballerinas struggled to hold for 3 seconds. When she finished, there was absolute silence in the studio. My God, Sophie whispered. Victoria was pale. She how? Madame Beaumont stepped forward, her eyes fixed on Helena. Who are you? And don't tell me you're just a janitor. No janitor has technique like that. Helena felt all the walls she had built in the last 12 years beginning to crack. She looked at Dmitri, who nodded encouragingly. My name, she said, her voice trembling, is Helena Santos. But 12 years ago, I was known as Helena Sokolova, principal dancer of the Bolshoi Theater. The studio exploded in murmurs. Ballerinas looked at each other in shock. Sophie had her hand over her mouth. And Victoria. Victoria was frozen, her face a mask of disbelief. Helena Sokolova? Said Madame Beaumont, her voice barely above a whisper. The Helena Sokolova? The prodigy who danced Odette/Odile at 19? Who won the gold medal at Prix de Lausanne? Yes, said Helena, tears beginning to fall. That was me. But you disappeared, said James, stepping forward. There was a scandal. Something about drugs and a ruined performance. You were banned from the Bolshoi. I was falsely accused, said Helena, her voice firmer now. During a performance of Giselle, my point shoe was sabotaged. One of my shoe ribbons was deliberately cut. In the middle of a grand jeté, my shoe came loose. I fell badly and destroyed my knee. She touched her knee instinctively. The performance was a disaster. And then, mysteriously, drugs were found in my dressing room. I tested positive for substances I'd never taken in my life. But no one believed me. Who would do that? Asked Sophie, horrified. Before Helena could answer, a cold voice came from the door. Because you were arrogant. Because you thought you were better than everyone. Everyone turned. Svetlana Petrov stood in the doorway. She had arrived early for a meeting with Madame Beaumont about the festival. At 48, she was still imposing, with platinum blonde hair and ice-cold eyes. Svetlana, said Helena, her entire body tensing. Helena Sokolova, said Svetlana, walking into the studio. I thought you had enough shame to never show up in the dance world again. And yet here you are, pretending to be a janitor. I am a janitor, said Helena, for 10 years, because you took everything from me. Svetlana laughed. Dear, you did this to yourself. The drugs, the fall, everything was your fault. You know it wasn't, said Helena, her voice trembling with repressed anger. You cut my shoe. You planted the drugs, because I got the Giselle role you wanted. Proof, said Svetlana, smiling coldly. Do you have any proof of these ridiculous accusations? Helena opened her mouth, but closed it again. No, she never had proof. She just knew in her heart. That's what I thought, said Svetlana. So I suggest you go back to your mop and... I have proof, said a weak voice from the door. Everyone turned. A woman of about 40 was there, thin and visibly nervous. Helena didn't recognize her immediately. Excuse me, who are you? Asked Madame Beaumont. My name is Natasha Ivanova, said the woman, entering hesitantly. I was a corps de ballet dancer at the Bolshoi 12 years ago, and I saw everything. Svetlana turned pale. Natasha, I saw you cutting Helena's shoe, said Natasha, her voice gaining strength. On the night of the performance, I thought it was just nerves, you adjusting your own equipment, but after Helena fell, I realized what I had seen. This is absurd, said Svetlana, but her voice was trembling now. And I saw you putting something in her dressing room, Natasha continued. A small plastic bag. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but when the drugs were found, I knew. I was afraid to speak up. You were powerful. I was nobody, but I've carried this guilt for 12 years. Tears streamed down Natasha's face. Helena, I'm sorry. Sorry for not speaking up. Your talent inspired me, and my cowardice allowed it to be destroyed. Helena was sobbing now, years of pain and injustice finally being validated. Dmitri placed his hand on her shoulder. Svetlana looked around the room, seeing all the accusing eyes on her. You're going to believe this failed ballerina? She's clearly making up stories. Svetlana, said Dmitri, his voice laden with disappointment. I always knew. I had no proof, but I knew. That's why I never stopped looking for Helena. That's why, when I found her here, I waited for the right moment. Madame Beaumont was visibly shaken. Svetlana Petrov, you are no longer welcome at this academy, and I will personally ensure the festival board knows about this. You won't judge anything while I have a voice. You can't do this. Svetlana exploded. I'm one of the most respected judges. You're a fraud, said Victoria, surprising everyone. The principal dancer stepped forward, looking directly at Svetlana. And you know how I know? Because I recognize a person who destroys others out of insecurity. Because I do the same thing. Victoria turned to Helena, tears in her eyes. I was cruel to you. I mocked you. Because I was afraid. afraid that someone would discover I'm not as good as I pretend to be, that I'm technically perfect but emotionally empty. She took a deep breath, trembling. I watched that video 100 times yesterday, and I cried, because you, in 20 minutes, created something I've never achieved in an entire career. Truth, emotion, soul. Victoria fell to her knees in front of Helena. Teach me, please. Teach me how to truly dance. Not with ego, but with heart. Helena was so shocked she couldn't speak. This was the woman who had constantly humiliated her, and now she was on her knees, asking for help. Stand up, Helena said finally, her voice gentle. You don't need to kneel. We all have insecurities. We all have fear. The question is what we do with that fear. Sophie was crying openly now. Other ballerinas too. Even James had red eyes. Madame Beaumont approached Helena. Ms. Sokolova. Helena, I'd like to offer a proposal. Choreograph our presentation for the festival. And not just that. Join our team as a permanent instructor. Teach these ballerinas what you know about technique and soul. Helena looked around the room, at the ballerinas who had ignored her, at Sophie, who had always been kind, at Victoria, who was transforming before her eyes, at Dmitri, who had never given up on her. I accept, she said, but with one condition. I want to create a program. Free classes for young people from underserved communities. Girls who dream of dancing but can't afford it. Because ballet shouldn't be just for the rich. Done, said Madame Beaumont immediately. We'll call it. What do you want to call it? Helena thought of her daughter, Isabella. How she wanted to show her that second chances were possible. That mistakes weren't the end. Hope program, she said, because that's what I want to give. Hope for those who think they've lost everything. In the following days, Helena worked tirelessly. She was no longer a janitor. Madame Beaumont had insisted she stop immediately and dedicate herself entirely to choreography and teaching. But the transition was strange. Years living in the shadows, and now suddenly back in the spotlight. Her first challenge was creating the choreography for the festival. She gathered the principal dancers, Victoria, Sophie, and 3 others in the studio. Before we begin, said Helena, you need to understand something. Perfect technique is important, but it's not everything. The judges want to see humanity, vulnerability. They want to see you, not just your body's executing steps. Victoria raised her hand timidly, a humble gesture she had never made before. How do we do that? How do we stop being perfect without seeming sloppy? You tell a story, said Helena. Every movement has meaning. It's not just an arabesque. It's reaching for something you lost. It's not just a grand jeté. It's leaping toward a future you fear, but hope for. She demonstrated a simple port de bras that she transformed into a narrative of loss and discovery. Each arm position told something. The audience didn't need to consciously understand, but they would feel it. The ballerinas watched hypnotized. This was something no instructor had taught. This was true art. Now you, said Helena. Victoria, show me an arabesque. But first, think of something you lost. Something real from your life. Victoria hesitated, then closed her eyes. When she opened them, there was genuine pain there. She executed the arabesque, and this time it wasn't just technically perfect. It was loaded with emotion. Beautiful, Sophie whispered. Helena worked with each ballerina individually, extracting their personal stories and weaving them into the choreography. The piece would be called Rebirth, about broken people finding strength to rise again. A week before the festival, Helena was in the studio alone, finalizing choreography details, when her phone rang. It was a number she recognized but hadn't called in years. Richard, her ex-husband. Her finger hovered over the reject button, but curiosity won. Hello, Helena. His voice was as cold as she remembered. I've heard some interesting rumors. Something about you being back in the ballet world. Yes, she said, keeping her voice firm. I'm choreographing a piece for the international festival. How convenient, said Richard, sarcasm dripping from every word. The drug addict band suddenly returns triumphant. You know I never use drugs, said Helena. And now we have proof I was sabotaged. Proof, he laughed. The testimony of a failed ballerina from 12 years ago. Good luck with that. But that's not why I'm calling. Isabella saw the news. She's confused. Helena's heart raced. Isabella, how is she? Richard, please, let me talk to her. Absolutely not, he cut in. I spent 12 years protecting our daughter from you. I won't let you come back and confuse her now that she's finally stable. Protecting her from me or from the truth? Helena felt anger growing. You told lies. Said I was an addict, that I abandoned you. But you know the truth. You always knew. The truth? Richard laughed bitterly. The truth is you love ballet more than your own family. The truth is you became obsessed with being a star. And when everything fell apart, you couldn't handle it. I was fighting for my innocence. Helena shouted. And you turned your back on me when I needed you most. You took my daughter and painted me as a monster. Silence on the other end. Then calmer. Isabella will attend your performance. She insisted. But don't think that changes anything. One pretty dance doesn't erase 12 years of abandonment. I never abandoned her. Helena was crying now. You wouldn't let me see her. I sent letters, gifts, tried to call. And scared her, said Richard. She doesn't want you in her life, Helena. Accept that. He hung up. Helena stood holding the phone, sobbing. After a few minutes, she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Dmitri. Is she coming? He asked gently. Yes, but Richard says she doesn't want to know me, that I'm just scaring her. Then show her who you really are, said Dmitri. Not with words Richard can distort, but with your dance. Let Isabella see her mother, not the version Richard created, but the real person, the artist, the fighter, the survivor. Helena wiped away tears. What if it's not enough? Then at least you tried, said Dmitri. But I have a feeling it will be enough, because truth always finds its way to the light. 3 days before the festival, the Hope program had its first class. Helena had reserved a smaller academy studio and publicized it in schools from underserved communities. 20 girls showed up, ages 8 to 16. Most had never taken a ballet class. They wore normal gym clothes, old leggings, oversized t-shirts, because they didn't have resources for expensive leotards. Helena looked at each little face, some shy, some defiant, all hopeful. Welcome, she said, smiling warmly. My name is Helena, and I've been exactly where you are. Without money for classes, without the right equipment, but with a huge dream to dance. A girl of about 10 raised her hand. Ma'am, is it true you were principal dancer of the Bolshoi? It's true, said Helena. But you know what's even more true? I started exactly like you, learning in community centers, using borrowed shoes. What matters isn't where you start. It's the passion you bring. Sophie had volunteered to help. Let's start with the basics, she said cheerfully. First position. Watch how Helena does it. Helena demonstrated, and the girls tried to imitate. Some were naturally graceful. Others struggled with coordination, but all had that sparkle in their eyes, that pure love of dance that professionals often lost. A 14-year-old girl named Jasmine was particularly talented. She picked up movements quickly and had impressive natural extension. Have you danced before? Asked Helena. Only at home, watching YouTube videos, said Jasmine shyly. My mom can't afford classes. Well, now you have classes, said Helena. And Jasmine, you have real talent. With training, you could go far. Jasmine's eyes filled with tears. Really? You really think so? I know, said Helena. And I'm going to teach you everything I know. Victoria appeared in the doorway, watching. After class, she approached Helena. That was beautiful, she said. Seeing those girls. I remembered why I started dancing. Not for fame or competition, but because I love to move. It's never too late to remember, said Helena. Can I help? Victoria asked hesitantly. With the program? I know I don't deserve it after how I treated you, but I want to give back somehow. Helena smiled. Victoria, everyone deserves second chances. I got mine. Now it's your turn. The night of the International Ballet Festival arrived. The theater was packed. Critics from around the world, directors of prestigious companies, and an audience eager for exceptional art. Helena was backstage with her ballerinas, all nervous but ready. "Remember," she said, holding Victoria's and Sophie's hands, "don't dance to impress. Dance to express. Tell your stories. The rest will happen naturally." Victoria was surprisingly calm. "Helena, thank you for teaching me that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's strength." "You learned well," said Helena, hugging her. "Now go out there and show the world." Helena went up to the technical booth, from where she would watch. Her heart stopped when she saw, in the 5th row, a gray-haired man sitting next to a teenage girl. Richard and Isabella. Her daughter had grown so much. At 16, Isabella was beautiful, dark hair like Helena's, intelligent eyes, posture that suggested perhaps she herself had interest in dance. But her face was closed, defensive. Dmitri appeared beside Helena. "She's here. Your girl." "She's not my girl anymore," said Helena, tears already forming. "Look how she looks at the stage. With anger. Like she's here against her will." "Wait until the dance begins," said Dmitri. "Words can lie, but dance always tells truth." The lights went down. The announcer said, "From the Beaumont Academy of New York, presenting Rebirth, choreographed by Helena Sokolova." There were murmurs of surprise in the audience. The name Sokolova was legend, but many thought she had disappeared or even died. The music began, an original composition Helena had commissioned, mixing classical elements with Brazilian rhythms. The curtains opened. Victoria was at the center of the stage, alone, in a broken position on the floor. The lighting was low, somber. She began to move, not with her usual mechanical perfection, but with genuine pain. Each movement told the story of someone who had fallen and was trying to get up. Sophie and the other ballerinas entered gradually, each representing an aspect of the journey: fear, hope, community, strength. The choreography flowed between rigorous classical and moments of free, contemporary movement. But it was at one specific moment that the audience fell into absolute silence. Victoria executed a sequence Helena had created specifically, an arabesque pench that transformed into a controlled fall, and then, with help from the other ballerinas, a triumphant lifting into a grand jeté that defied gravity. It was Helena's story, her fall, her reconstruction, her victory, told through the ballerinas' bodies. In the audience, Isabella had tears streaming down her face. Richard was rigid, but even he seemed moved. The dance culminated in all the ballerinas at the center of the stage, not in perfect individual poses, but supporting each other, a physical representation of community and collective strength. When the music stopped and the ballerinas took their bow, there were 3 seconds of absolute silence. Then the theater exploded. Standing ovation, thunderous applause, shouts of brava, echoing through the walls. Helena was crying backstage. Dmitri hugged her. "You did it. You came back." The judges deliberated for only 15 minutes, a record time. When they returned, the head judge, replacing Svetlana, who had been removed in disgrace, announced, "It's rare we see something that transcends technique and touches the soul." Rebirth did exactly that. By unanimous decision, the Best Choreography Award goes to Helena Sokolova. More applause. Helena had to go on stage to accept. Her legs trembled as she walked. "Thank you," she said into the microphone, her voice breaking. "This piece is dedicated to everyone who fell and thought they could never get up again, to everyone who was unjustly judged, to everyone who lost everything but found courage to start over, and especially," she looked directly at where Isabella was sitting, "to my daughter. Isabella, if you're watching, this is the mother you didn't know. This is who I really am." Isabella was sobbing openly now. Richard had his arm around her, but for the first time, his face showed not anger, but something like remorse. After the performance, there was a reception. Helena was surrounded by people, directors offering contracts, journalists wanting interviews, ballerinas asking to study with her. But she only had eyes for the door, waiting to see if Isabella would come. Half an hour passed. An hour. Helena began to lose hope. Then she saw her. Isabella stood in the doorway, alone. Richard wasn't with her. The two women looked at each other across the crowded room. 12 years of separation. 12 years of pain, lies, and misunderstandings. Isabella began to walk toward Helena. Each step seemed like an eternity. When they finally stood face to face, Isabella spoke, her voice trembling. "Dad said you were an addict, that you abandoned us, that you were selfish and only cared about fame." "Isabella," Helena began, but her daughter raised her hand. "But that dance," Isabella continued, tears falling freely. "It was you in the dance. I saw you in the fall. I saw you rising. And I realized Dad lied. About everything. Honey, your father was scared." "No." Isabella shook her head firmly. "Don't excuse him. He lied. And he robbed me of you for 12 years. Robbed me of knowing an incredible mother. An artist. A survivor." Helena was crying so hard she could barely see. "I tried to see you. I sent letters." "I know." Isabella pulled out a crumpled envelope from her pocket. "I found them all. He kept them in a box in the attic. I read them all this week. All the birthday letters. All the explanations. All the declarations of love." She stepped forward and hugged Helena. Mother and daughter, finally reunited after 12 years. "I'm sorry," Isabella sobbed. "Sorry for believing him. Sorry for not looking for you." "No, no." Helena held her daughter's face. "You were a child. You had no way to know. But now we can start over. If you want." "I want," said Isabella. "I want to know my mother. The real one. Not the version Dad created." Sophie appeared, seeing the scene and crying with joy. Victoria was nearby too, emotional. "Isabella," said Helena, "I want you to meet some important people. This is Sophie, one of the most talented ballerinas I know. And Victoria, who taught me it's never too late to change." Isabella looked around, seeing all the people who had gathered around her mother. "You built a family here." "I did," said Helena. "But the most important person was missing. You." 3 months later, the whole program had grown to more than 50 students. Victoria and Sophie were regular volunteer instructors, and Helena had a special new assistant, Isabella, who had decided to take a gap year before college to learn about dance and help with the program. "Mom, Jasmine is ready for point shoes," said Isabella one day after class. "Already?" Helena smiled. She progressed quickly. "She learns from the best," said Isabella, hugging her mother. Madame Beaumont had expanded the program, dedicating an entire studio and offering full scholarships to the most talented students. The Beaumont Academy was transforming from a closed elite place to a community that valued talent over privilege. Richard had tried to get in touch a few times, wanting to see Isabella. Helena encouraged it because despite everything, he was still her father. But the relationship had changed. Isabella saw her father clearly now, a man who had let fear and pride harm his family. "He called today," said Isabella one night, while they had dinner at Helena's apartment. "He apologized." "Really?" "Said he spent 12 years angry because he couldn't handle the idea that you were treated unjustly and he didn't protect you." Helena considered this. "Anger is easier than guilt. I understand." "You're amazing, you know," said Isabella. "After everything he did, you still have compassion." "Because anger is prison," said Helena. "I already spent years in prison by Svetlana's lies, by my own insecurities. I won't spend the rest of my life imprisoned by anger at Richard." 1 year after the festival, Helena was on the stage of the Beaumont Academy Theater, but not to dance. It was the first annual Hope Program presentation. The students would show what they had learned. The theater was packed with the girls' families, most visiting a ballet theater for the first time. Mothers cried with pride seeing their daughters in shoes and leotards the Academy had provided free of charge. Jasmine, now 15, was the prima ballerina of the night. She executed a variation Helena had choreographed especially for her. Combining classical technique, they had spent months perfecting with movements that honored the girls' diverse origins. When she finished, her mother, a hospital janitor, was crying in the front row. After the presentation, she ran to Helena. "Thank you," she said, holding Helena's hands. "My daughter had a dream I thought was impossible, and you made it real. How can I thank you?" By watching her fly, said Helena. That's all the thanks I need. Dmitri, now 73 and officially retired, was in the audience. He approached Helena, with eyes shining with pride. You know what's most beautiful about all this, he said. It's not that you became principal dancer again. It's that you became something greater. A mentor, an inspiration, a beacon for those who lost their way. I learned from the best, said Helena, hugging her old mentor. You never gave up on me, Professor, even when everyone else did. Because I saw something in that first class, said Dmitri. I saw not just exceptional technique. I saw a survivor's heart. I saw a phoenix waiting to be reborn. 2 years after the festival, Helena received an official letter. It was from the Bolshoi Theater. Dear Miss Sokolova, it is with deep regret and sincere apologies that we officially acknowledge the injustice you suffered 14 years ago. In light of new evidence and testimony from Natasha Ivanova, the Bolshoi formally revokes your expulsion and restores your name and reputation. The letter continued, offering a position as resident choreographer and principal instructor, with substantial salary and all the resources she needed. Isabella read over her mother's shoulder. Mom, this is amazing. Are you going to accept? Helena looked out the window of her New York apartment. Outside, she could see the Beaumont Academy building. She could imagine the 50 girls of the Hope program training at that moment. She could think of Victoria, who had transformed from cruel antagonist to dedicated friend. Of Sophie, who now directed her own program inspired by theirs. Of Jasmine, who had received a full scholarship to professional ballet school. No, said Helena finally, putting the letter aside. My place is here. With you. With the program. With the community we built. But Mom, it's the Bolshoi. It was your dream. It was my dream, Helena corrected. But dreams change. They grow. 14 years ago, my dream was to be the best ballerina in the world. Today, my dream is to create space for others to become the best versions of themselves. Isabella hugged her mother. You know I'm completely biased, but I think you're the most incredible person I know. 5 years after the festival, Helena was 43. The Hope program had expanded to 10 cities in the United States and 3 internationally. More than 500 girls had gone through the program, many earning scholarships to professional dance schools. But Helena never distanced herself from direct teaching. Every week, she still personally taught at least 3 classes. On this particular day, a new student arrived, a 9-year-old girl named Maya, extremely shy, who stayed at the back of the room trying to be invisible. Helena approached gently. Hi, Maya. Is this your first class? The girl nodded, not speaking. Are you nervous? Another nod. You know something? Said Helena, kneeling to be at Maya's height. When I started dancing, I was your age, and I was so nervous I threw up before the first class. Maya finally looked at her, surprised. It's true, Helena smiled. And you know what my teacher told me? She said, being nervous means you care. It means this is important to you. And that's good. Do you still get nervous? Maya asked her first words. Always, Helena admitted. Before every performance, every new class, every important moment. But I learned that nervousness and excitement are the same energy. I just need to channel it into dance. Maya smiled shyly. Can I try? Of course you can. And you know what else? I'll be right here beside you. If it gets too scary, squeeze my hand. Deal. Deal. Watching from the doorway, Victoria whispered to Isabella. Your mother is magic. She transforms fear into courage just by being present. She does that with everyone, said Isabella proudly. She did it with me. Transformed an angry, confused teenager into someone who wants to help others. Isabella, now 21, was studying dance pedagogy, planning to dedicate her career to expanding programs like her mother's. 10 years after the festival, the city of New York dedicated a municipal dance studio in Helena's honor. The plaque read, Helena Sokolova Dance Center, where second chances flourish. At the opening ceremony, the mayor made a speech. Helena Sokolova could have chosen bitterness, could have let injustice define her story, but she chose grace. She chose to lift others. and in doing so, not only recovered her own art, but democratized ballet for a new generation. Helena went up on stage to speak, Isabella by her side. Now 48. Helena still had the graceful posture of a ballerina, but there was something more, a serenity that only comes from someone who has made peace with the past. "Thank you," she said, "but I need to be honest. This center isn't about me. It's about every girl who was told she wasn't the right type for ballet, about every young person whose dream was considered impossible due to economic circumstance, about every person who fell and thought they couldn't get up." She looked at the audience, seeing familiar faces: Dimitri, now 82 but still present; Victoria, who had become artistic director of the Beaumont Academy; Sophie, directing 3 programs, inspired by the original; Jasmine, now a professional ballerina in a national company; and dozens of former students who had pursued careers in dance or simply carried resilience lessons to other areas of life. "True grace," said Helena, "isn't in perfect steps. It's in the courage to dance again, to rise after each fall, to transform pain into purpose, and to remember that none of us dance alone. There are always hands ready to lift us, if we have the humility to accept them." The ovation was prolonged, but for Helena, the most significant moment came afterward, when a woman of about 60 approached hesitantly. "Helena, do you remember me?" Helena looked carefully, then her eyes widened. Natasha Ivanova. "I came from the United States especially for this," said Natasha, tears in her eyes, "to see what my testimony helped create. Helena, spending 12 years in silence was my greatest regret, but seeing what you've built, maybe, in some strange way, everything needed to happen this way, to transform you into the person you are today." Helena hugged Natasha. "Thank you for finally finding courage. I know how difficult it was." "You inspired me," said Natasha. "After the testimony, I started teaching dance in my community in Russia. Free programs, like yours, because you showed me it's never too late to do the right thing." Years passed. Helena continued teaching, mentoring, building. Her story was told in documentaries, books, articles, but she always avoided the celebrity aspect, preferring to keep focus on the work. At 55, Helena finally stopped dancing professionally. Her knee no longer allowed it, but she didn't see this as loss. "I danced with my body for 40 years, she said in an interview. "Now I dance through my students. And there's a beauty in that, seeing your art multiplied, amplified through hundreds of young lives." Isabella, now 28 and director of 3 dance centers, was expecting her first child. "Mom, if it's a girl, can I name her Helena?" Helena had to hold back tears. "It would be the greatest honor,"